Elias Vorne was 17 years old, broke, and absolutely, catastrophically lost. He stood at the entrance of the Nythara Floating Market with a torn canvas bag on his shoulder and mud on his boots, staring at a world that made absolutely no sense to him. The market hovered 200 meters above the ocean surface of Delos, 9, suspended by ancient gravitational anchors that the locals called the bones. It was a maze of suspended platforms connected by rope bridges, magnetic walkways, and in some cases, nothing at all. Just pure faith and momentum carrying merchants and buyers from one stall to the next. Every species in the known reaches traded here. The Garathi, with their 4 arms and violet-tipped mandibles, sold liquefied starlight in thumb-sized vials. The fish moved on water-filled exosuits, their tentacles pressing against the glass as they haggled through voice amplifiers. There were the Deluma, tall and silver, who communicated primarily through scent and would occasionally waft something so overwhelming at a potential buyer that the buyer would immediately agree to any price just to make them stop. And then there was Elias. Human. Singular. The only one. He hadn't planned to come to Nythara. He hadn't planned to be on Delos, 9 at all. 3 weeks ago, he'd been working in the cargo bay of a mid-class hauler called the Perseverance, earning passage money back to the human colony of Ashford Station by sorting vacuum-packed protein blocks and arguing with the ship's AI about whether a crate labeled miscellaneous biological counted as live cargo or dead cargo. The answer, as it turned out, was neither. It was a litter of Crescent dust foxes that someone had smuggled aboard, and the subsequent chaos of 27 fox-shaped creatures with bioluminescent tails erupting into the ship's ventilation system had led to an emergency docking at the nearest port. Delos 9. Nythara Market. The Perseverance had dropped him, his bag, and his 3-day supply of nutrient paste onto the docking platform with a note from the captain that said, "Sorry kid. Come back when the foxes are caught. Could be a week. Could be a month. Here's 40 reach credits. Don't spend it all in one place." 40 credits. Elias had already spent 9 of them on a sleeping bunk at a hostel run by an ancient Delumo woman named Sessa who had, inexplicably, decided she liked him. He had no idea why. Sessa had barely spoken 2 words to him, but every morning she left a bowl of something warm and orange outside his door, and he had learned not to ask what it was and just eat it. That left him 31 credits, a week minimum until his ride came back, and nothing to do except wander the market and try not to get scammed. He was, it must be said, doing a terrible job of the last part. 40 credits for a navigation chip, he was currently saying to a Garathi merchant with 3 gold hoops in his upper mandible. "The chip is the size of my thumbnail. It is not the size that matters," the merchant said, in surprisingly clean standard tongue. "It is the knowledge inside the size. This chip contains full cartography of the deep reaches, 17 unmapped current lanes, and the location of a fuel cache that the Harak traders do not want found. I don't need the deep reaches. I need to get back to Ashford Station. Ashford Station is in the deep reaches." Elias stared at him. "No, it isn't." The merchant stared back, then slowly, with great dignity, reached under his counter and produced a different chip. "This one is 20 credits. It has Ashford Station. What does the other 20 credits worth of chip have?" "The location of a very good noodle stand on Peller, too." Elias thought about this for a moment. "I'll take both," he said, before he could stop himself, and handed over a third of his remaining money to a Garathi merchant who walked away looking extremely pleased with himself. Elias looked down at the 2 chips in his hand. He didn't even have a device to read them. He put them in his pocket and kept walking. The market had a rhythm to it once you stopped being terrified and started paying attention. The outer ring was for tourists, quick trades, bright displays, things designed to catch the eye of someone who had an hour to spend and would never return. The middle ring was where the real commerce happened. Bulk deals, long-standing relationships between merchants, the slow, serious business of supply chains and interplanetary logistics. And the inner ring, the center of the floating platform, was something else entirely. Elias had been warned about the inner ring by Sessa, who had held up her 4-fingered hand and made a gesture he interpreted as "stay away" or possibly "this number of things will kill you." He wasn't sure. So naturally, he was now headed directly toward it. The inner ring was quieter, darker. The stalls here weren't flashy. They were small and often curtained, with no visible merchandise, and the merchants themselves were frequently not visible at all, just a shape behind fabric, a voice from shadow. These were the stalls that dealt in things that didn't have official categories in the Reach's trade codex. Information, memories, sometimes extracted and sold. Passage to places that weren't officially on any map. Documents, debts, certain biological components that were technically legal if you didn't ask where they'd come from. Elias was looking at a stall that sold something advertised only as transition solutions, which could mean literally anything and probably meant something terrible when he heard it. A sound, very soft, almost beneath the ambient noise of the market, the distant calls of vendors, and the hum of gravity anchors, and the constant percussion of the fish-water suits. A whisper. Human. He stopped walking. Human boy. Please. Do not look at me directly. Keep walking as if you did not hear this. Elias kept walking. He kept his eyes forward. His heart had begun doing something unpleasant against his ribs. Good, the voice said. It was coming from somewhere to his left. There is a stall 3 units ahead that sells scent-weave fabric. Pretend to look at the fabric. He reached the stall. The fabric was extraordinary. It rippled slowly in a non-existent breeze, shifting through colors as it moved. And when he leaned slightly toward it, he caught a faint smell of something like rain on hot stone. He picked up a corner of it and turned it over in his hands, which he hoped looked like casual browsing. My name is Ava-Siel, the voice said. I am in the stall directly behind you. Please do not turn around yet. Okay, he said quietly, holding the fabric up as if examining its weave. I have been here for 11 days, Ava-Siel said. I was brought here by a man named Creth Dolivan. He has put me on display. He intends to sell me at the end of this market cycle, which ends in 4 days. Do you understand what I am telling you? Elias went very still. He understood. Who? What are you? He asked, still not turning around. A pause. I am Nythic, she said. Does that mean anything to you? No, he admitted. It means I am the last one, she said. The very last one of my kind, as far as anyone knows. Which is why I am worth so much to Creth Dolivan. Which is why he has been feeding me just enough to stay alive and presentable and has not let me leave this stall in 11 days. Elias set down the fabric. He looked up at the merchant, a sleepy-looking Deluma who was not paying attention to him at all. I'm going to turn around now, he said. I would prefer if you didn't, Ava-Siel said. Not because I am ashamed. Because there are 2 of Creth's guards stationed nearby. If you look at me with obvious attention, they will notice, and they will either move me or hurt you. I don't want either of those things. Why are you talking to me? Elias asked, turning back to the fabric as if he'd decided to look at it again. Because you are the only human in this market, she said. Possibly the only human in this entire district. And humans are the one species that Creth's network doesn't have eyes in. His informants are Garathi, Deluma, and 3 different forms of synthetic intelligence. He doesn't bother with humans because humans are not supposed to be here. You are invisible to him in a way nothing else is. That's... Elias paused. That's actually a lot of information to get from noticing I'm human. I have had 11 days with very little to do except observe, she said quietly, and there was something in her voice that made his chest hurt. Not sadness exactly. The absence of something, where something should have been. What do you want me to do? He asked. Another pause. Longer this time. I don't know, she said. That is the honest answer. I have been trying to think of a plan for 11 days, and I have not found one. I saw you this morning, walking through the outer ring, clearly lost, clearly not from here, clearly human. I thought about whether to speak to you for 4 hours. And then you came back, and you walked into the inner ring, which means you are either brave or foolish. The second one, he said immediately. And I decided that doing something was better than doing nothing. I am told humans feel this way instinctively, that you are, as a species, predisposed to action over paralysis. Some of us, he said. Personally, I've been paralyzed plenty. But you are still here. I'm still here, he agreed. He finally allowed himself one brief glance over his shoulder. Just enough to register. A stall with dark curtains, a low platform, and on the platform, a figure. She was slight, wrapped in a loose garment of dark fabric that covered most of her. Her skin, what he could see of it, was a deep blue-gray, almost the color of deep ocean water just before dark. Her hair was pale, nearly white, fine and dense. Her eyes, which met his for just a fraction of a second before he looked away, were large and luminous and a color he had no name for, somewhere between amber and silver, like sunlight through old glass. She looked young. She looked exhausted. She looked like someone who had been holding themselves very still for a very long time. He turned back to the fabric. "I'll come back," he said. "People say that," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm still going to." He put the fabric down, nodded vaguely at the merchant, and walked away. Elias did not have a plan. He walked back to the outer ring, found a food stall run by an ancient automated unit that dispensed something approximating fried vegetables in exchange for 2 credits, and sat on the edge of a platform with his legs dangling over 200 meters of empty air, eating and thinking. The facts, as he understood them. 1 girl. 11 days captive. For days until she was sold. 1 guard post, possibly 2. An unknown buyer. Unknown price. Unknown location of the sale. His resources, 31 credits, minus the 2 he'd just spent on vegetables, so 29. 2 navigation chips he couldn't use. A canvas bag containing a change of clothes. A journal he'd been meaning to write in for 6 months. A multi-tool with a broken 3rd attachment, and the nutrition paste, which he'd largely eaten. His skills, cargo sorting. Mild mechanical repair. 3 years of basic schooling on Ashford Station that had covered reading, arithmetic, and a survey course in galactic history that he'd mostly slept through. His plan, non-existent. He ate another piece of fried vegetable and stared at the ocean below. It was a deep green, almost black at the center, and there were things moving in it, large, slow things, turning just below the surface. Delos, 9 was a water world. The floating markets existed because nothing else could. There was no land to build on. Everything here was suspended, temporary, existing at the will of the bones. Elias thought about Ava-Siel saying, "I am the last one." He thought about what that meant. Not just being alone, being the end of something. The last page of a book. Every word that had ever existed in that language, concentrated in one person. He thought about how she'd said it. Factually. Without bitterness, which somehow made it worse. He thought about how she'd watched him for 4 hours before deciding to speak. He pulled out his journal, flipped to a clean page, and wrote at the top, "Things I do not know how to do." Then he began listing them. Break someone out of captivity. Fight a professional guard. Negotiate with a criminal network. Navigate an alien market with 30 credits. Move through a floating platform without being noticed. He looked at the list. Then he wrote at the bottom, "Things I might actually be able to do." He tapped his pen against the paper for a moment. Then he wrote, "Be invisible. Because I'm human and nobody here expects me to do anything." He stared at that for a while. Then he wrote, "Find out what Kreth Dolivan needs." He wasn't sure why he wrote that, but it seemed, vaguely, like the beginning of something. He closed the journal and went to find Sessa. Sessa was, as always, sitting in the small enclosed section of the market hostel that she called her consideration room, which appeared to be a closet with a chair in it. She was very old and very gray and smelled faintly of something like incense and deep water, and she looked at Elias with the perpetual expression of mild disappointment she seemed to reserve specifically for him. He sat down on the floor across from her, because there was no other chair, and explained the situation. Sessa listened without interrupting, which he was grateful for. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she made a scent, something sharp and questioning. He'd been around her long enough to have learned maybe 5 or 6 of her scent expressions, and this one meant, "Why does this concern you?" "Because she's trapped," he said. Another scent. "There are many trapped things in the Nythara market." "I know," he said. "But she talked to me." Sessa looked at him for a very long time. Then she made a scent he hadn't encountered before. Complex, layered, like several things at once. He couldn't read it. "What does that mean?" he asked. She stood up slowly, moved past him to a small storage unit in the corner, and produced a flat card which she handed to him. On it was an address, a location code within the market, written in standard tongue, and a name, Fent Malos. She made a simple scent. "Go there." "Who is Fent Malos?" he asked. She made the scent again, more emphatically. "Go there." He looked at the card. He looked at her. "Thank you," he said. She made a new scent that he was fairly certain meant, "Don't thank me yet," and sat back down in her chair. Fent Malos was a fiche. He operated out of a stall in the middle ring that appeared to sell surplus navigation equipment, but was, as Elias quickly understood, actually a front for something considerably more interesting. The stall was staffed by a synthetic unit at the front counter, But when Elias showed the card Sessa had given him to the synthetic, it led him without comment through a curtain and into a backspace that was entirely submerged. A tank, essentially, with transparent walls, connected to the market structure by a series of pressurized tubes. Fent Malos was on the other side of the glass. His exosuit was old and heavily modified, covered in additions and attachments that Elias couldn't identify, and his tentacles moved constantly, never quite still, like a musician's hands between songs. His voice, through the amplifier built into the suit, was rich and slightly resonant, like someone speaking into a large, empty room. "Sessa sent you," he said, not as a question. "Yes," Elias said. "You're the human boy, the one from the hauler with the foxes. News travels fast. Sessa has very good information networks," Fent said. "And you are the only human in the market. Unusual things attract attention." He tilted slightly in the water. "What do you want?" Elias explained. Fent listened with the still attention of an ocean creature, motionless except for those constant hands, watching everything. When Elias finished, Fent said, "Kreth Dalavan." "Yes. You know what Kreth is. I know he's holding a Nythic girl and planning to sell her. He's also the primary information broker for the Inner Ring and has trade relationships with 6 of the 12 major species guilds operating out of this market," Fent said. "He is not someone who can be approached directly. Not by anyone who wants to continue existing." "I wasn't going to approach him directly," Elias said. "Then what were you going to do?" "I was hoping you might have a better idea than me." Fent was quiet for a moment. His tentacles shifted. "Why do you care?" he asked. "You don't know this girl. You have no stake in her freedom. Humans are not typically associated with acts of this kind." "Acts of what kind?" "Impractical altruism." Elias thought about that. "I think some of us are," he said. "I think it depends on the human." Fent made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been something entirely unrelated to humor. "There is a way," he said finally. "It is not without risk. And it will cost you. I have 29 credits." "I do not want credits," Fent said. "I want the navigation chip." Elias blinked. "How do you know I have?" "You bought it from Orth 7 this morning at the front of the outer ring," Fent said. "He sends me a summary of unusual transactions. A human buying a Deep Reaches cartography chip is unusual." Elias stared at the fiche behind the glass. "Does anyone in this market not know everything about me?" "Kreth Dalavan," Fent said, "as your new friend already told you. That is, in fact, the only reason this plan might work." The plan, as Fent explained it over the next hour, was this. Kreth Dalavan was in the process of trying to finalize a supply arrangement with a mid-tier hauler called the Vera Consortium, who operated in the Deep Reaches. The arrangement was for bulk shipment of something called Grade 7 compression fuel, which was legal, boring, and not the point. The point was that the Vera Consortium used human navigators exclusively, one of their known eccentricities, and Kreth had been trying for 3 months to make contact with a human navigator who could serve as an intermediary for the deal. The Deep Reaches cartography chip Elias had accidentally bought that morning contained updated navigational data for exactly the routes the Vera Consortium used. "I am not a navigator," Elias said. "Kreth doesn't know that," Fent said. "He will very quickly figure it out. You only need him to believe it for approximately 40 minutes, Fent said. "Long enough to get you into his inner stall. Long enough for a specific thing to happen." "What specific thing?" "Ava-Siel," Fent said, "has not been entirely passive for 11 days. She has been careful, but she has been paying attention. She knows the guard rotation. She knows which anchor point on the east side of the inner ring has a loose connection to the maintenance walkway beneath the platform. She knows that during the 40-minute window between 3rd and 4th shift, the east side is covered by a single guard instead of 2. Elias looked at him. "You've been in contact with her." "We have been in contact for 8 days, Fent said. "Since she found a way to tap the market communication channel using a piece of equipment Kreth left in her stall. She's been looking for a way out since day 2. A pause. "She is very resourceful." "Then why haven't you helped her already?" Fent's tentacles slowed for a moment. "Because I cannot enter the inner ring," he said. "Kreth knows me. He knows what I do. Any approach from me would be seen. Any proxy I sent would be identified." He looked at Elias steadily. "But you, a human boy who arrived 3 days ago by accident, who bought a navigation chip on impulse, who has no known connection to anyone in this market's deeper structures. You are, as she told you, invisible. Elias sat back in his chair. He pressed his hands flat against his knees and thought about all the ways this could go wrong. There were many. He thought about Ava-Siel saying I am the last one in that quiet, factual voice. What do I say to Kreth, he said. Kreth Dalavan was not what Elias expected. He'd constructed, in his imagination, something monstrous, some obvious villain with obvious markers of menace. Kreth was, instead, a small and almost gentle-looking Garathi, older than most Elias had seen, with dull-colored mandibles and only 2 of his 4 hands actively present, the other 2 tucked into a long coat. He worked from a space in the deepest part of the inner ring, not a stall so much as an office, enclosed on 3 sides, with a desk and a light source and a synthetic assistant that stood in the corner without moving. He looked at Elias with the patient attention of someone who had seen a great many things and was in no hurry to be surprised. You say you have contacts with the Varric Consortium, he said. I grew up on Ashford Station, Elias said. My uncle ran cargo coordination for the consortium for 12 years before he retired. I've been working haulers since I was 14. I know their routes. I know their people. He put the navigation chip on the desk. That's current cartography for the 6 routes they prioritize. Updated 8 months ago. Kreth looked at the chip without touching it. Where did you get this? Off a consortium navigator who owed me a favor, Elias said. He'd spent 20 minutes practicing saying this, so it sounded casual. Look, I'm not here to give you a biography. I'm here because I heard you're trying to reach their acquisition people and not having luck. I have a direct line. The question is whether it's worth your time to talk. Kreth picked up the chip, turned it over. You're very young. Yes. And you arrived 3 days ago on a hauler with a mechanical problem. Elias kept his face neutral with an effort. Fox problem. Not mechanical. Something shifted slightly in Kreth's expression, the tiniest realignment. So small Elias almost missed it. He realized, with a cold jolt, that this was amusement. Kreth Dalavan was amused by him. Sit down, Kreth said. Elias sat down. They talked for 37 minutes. It was the most exhausting 37 minutes of Elias's life. Every answer he gave carefully, staying as close to truth as possible so he didn't have to track lies. He was young and new to the reaches. He didn't want work. He did have some connection to Ashford Station and through it to the consortium, even if that connection was considerably more tenuous than he was implying. He let Kreth do most of the asking and answered with the particular honesty of someone who is not lying about the things being asked, only about their significance. Meanwhile, somewhere in the east side of the inner ring, a girl with ocean-colored skin was moving through a gap in the anchor structure that she'd identified after 11 days of careful watching and was making her way, one careful step at a time, down to the maintenance walkway below the platform. This was the plan. Finn had relayed it to her. She had confirmed the window. The agreement was 40 minutes with Kreth, not a moment more. After 40 minutes, Elias would make his excuses and leave, and she would be gone, and Finn had 3 platforms over a safe location where she could wait while Finn arranged transport off Delos. 9 using favors he had been accumulating for years and had apparently been waiting for the right occasion to spend. 37 minutes. 38. I think, Kreth said, leaning back slightly, that you might be exactly what you say you are. I also think you might be something else entirely. I find I'm uncertain, which is unusual for me. I'm just a cargo worker who happened to be in the right place, Elias said. He made himself look straight at the older Garathi's flat, patient eyes. I'm not trying to complicate your day. I'm trying to find work while I wait for my ride. 39 minutes. I'll take the chip, Kreth said, in exchange for 12 credits and a communication thread to the consortium's acquisition team, which I'll have sent to your station by tomorrow morning. 12 credits. For a chip he'd paid 20 credits for. Elias kept his face still. That works, he said. 40 minutes. He stood up, shook the 2 closest of Kreth's 4 hands, accepted the credit transfer, and walked out. He walked to the middle ring. He did not run. He did not look behind him. He found the maintenance access panel that Finn had marked on a small paper he'd been carrying in his pocket, and he knocked 3 times. A pause. The panel opened. Ava-Siel climbed out. She was taller than she'd looked on the platform, and the deep blue-gray of her skin in proper light, not the dim curtained light of Kreth's inner ring, was extraordinary, luminous almost, like water with light moving through it. She was breathing quickly and her hands were shaking slightly, but her eyes when they found his were steady. You're the boy, she said. I'm Elias, he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, I need to sit down. Fence place is 2 sections over, he said. He said to come directly. I know, she said. I just need 1 moment first. He stood next to her in the maintenance corridor, which smelled of salt water and machine oil, while she took several long, slow breaths. The platform hummed around them. Somewhere distant, the Garathi vendor was probably calling out to potential customers. The Deluma were probably wafting something overwhelming at someone. The market continued, as it always did, indifferent to every individual drama occurring within it. 11 days, she said quietly. I know. I thought about jumping, she said. Into the ocean. Not to die. I can breathe in water. But Kretha's people have submersible units, and they would have retrieved me within minutes. She looked at her hands. The shaking was slowing. I thought about a great many things. Most of them didn't work. The communication channel worked. That worked, she agreed. And you worked. Elias thought about what Fint had said, impractical altruism. He thought about how he'd sat on the edge of the platform with his legs dangling and thought, vaguely, about a girl who was the last of something, and how he'd known, without being able to articulate exactly why, that doing nothing was not something he was capable of. What happens now, he asked. Fint has transport arranged, she said. 3 days. A fish collective vessel heading Corward. There's a research station near Vel, 5. They've been trying to find Nythic survivors for 9 years. I've been in contact with them. She paused. They'll want to study me. I knew that would happen. It is. She considered. It is acceptable. Better than the alternative. I'm sorry, he said. That's your best option. It is better than being sold, she said, with a slight precision that suggested she was very carefully not making it sound as bleak as it was. They walked the 2 sections to Fent's stall. Fent was waiting, his tentacles active with something that seemed like relief. He gave Ava-Siel access to a secure interior space, brought her what looked like food and water, things she accepted with careful, controlled gratitude, and then he looked at Elias for a long moment. You lost money on that navigation chip, he observed. 8 credits, Elias agreed. I'll cover that, Fent said. You don't have to. I know. He handed over 8 credits anyway. Elias pocketed them. He was quiet for a moment. Is she going to be okay? Fent considered this with the seriousness it deserved. The research station at Vel, 5 is legitimate, he said finally. They study extinct and near-extinct cultures. They will want her knowledge, her memories of her people, whatever she can tell them about Nythic language, biology, history. She will be, in certain ways, always a subject. He paused. But they are not cruel. And she will be safe. Safe isn't the same as free. No, Fent said. It isn't. Another pause. It's better than where she was. Elias thought about that for a while. On the 3rd day, the fish collective vessel arrived at the docking arm on the far north side of the market. Elias stood at the railing with Ava-Siel while the crew loaded supplies. She had spent 3 days at Fent's, resting, eating, and doing something Fent described as recalibrating, a Nythic process, apparently, for recovering from prolonged confinement. Whatever it was, it had worked. The trembling in her hands was gone. Her eyes were clearer. She was wrapped in a new garment. Fence adjusted, and she stood at the railing with her head tilted slightly up, facing into the constant ocean wind that crossed the platform from the east. Where is Ashford Station from here? She asked. Northeast, he said. 14 light days. Maybe 15, depending on current lanes. You're home. More or less. He thought about the protein blocks and the Fox chaos and the 3 years of hauler work. It's where I'm from. I'm not sure it's where I'm going. She looked at him with those amber silver eyes. What does that mean? I don't know yet, he said honestly. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I have something for you. She reached into the fold of her garment and produced a small object. A smooth, flat stone, dark blue, oval. Very ordinary looking. Nythic material, she said. The last fragment I have of a larger piece. It's worthless to anyone who doesn't know what it is, and even to people who do. It has no market value. But, she paused, and for the first time since he'd met her, something in her expression wavered, just slightly. My grandmother carried it. I would like it to go somewhere that it will be cared for. He looked at the stone. He looked at her. I'll care for it, he said. I know you will, she said. That's why I'm giving it to you. He took it. It was warm in his hand. The vessel crew signaled for boarding. Elias Vorne, Ava-Siel said, and it was the first time she'd used his full name, and it sounded different in her voice than in his own head. Something in her pronunciation altered it slightly, made it sound like a word in a language he didn't know but could almost understand. Ava-Siel, he said. She held out her hand. Nythic farewell gesture, she'd told him, palm toward the other person, fingers slightly open. He mirrored it. Their hands didn't touch. They didn't need to. She turned and walked up the boarding ramp, and the vessel doors closed behind her, and the ship began its slow pull away from the dock. Elias stood at the railing until it was gone. Then he reached into his pocket and turned the blue stone over in his fingers. He had 29 credits. He had a pair of navigation chips, one of which now had no corresponding pair. He had a hostel room for 4 more days, a Delumo woman who fed him orange soup without being asked, and a ride coming, eventually, on a hauler that was currently somewhere full of bioluminescent foxes. He had a stone from a woman who was the last of her kind, who had watched him for 4 hours before deciding he might be trustworthy, and who had been right. He thought, it's better than where she was. He thought, but it's not enough. He thought, and this was the thought that stayed with him, that he would turn over in his hands the way he was turning over the stone, for years afterward, on haulers and stations, and in ports and corridors, and all the places a person ends up when they're trying to figure out where they belong. Someone should be doing more of this. Somewhere in the reaches, there should be someone doing more of this. He wasn't sure yet if that someone was him. But he put the stone in his pocket, next to his heart, and he went back to the market, and he sat on the edge of the platform with his feet dangling over 200 meters of ocean, and he thought about it for a very long time. The message came through a standard relay station, no identifying header, 3 short lines. The research team at Vel 5 found 2 more survivors, Nythic, a man and a child, in cryostasis on a derelict ship near the outer boundary. They woke this morning. I am not the last one. I thought you should know. Yes. Elias read the message 3 times. Then he put his reader down on the desk of the small ship he now operated out of, a second-hand fish vessel he'd bought on credit and named, for reasons nobody quite understood, the consideration, and he reached into his chest pocket and took out the blue stone. He held it in his palm for a long time. Then he smiled, for the first time in what felt like a while.